So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and you'll have to accept my apologies as there is building work going on nearby once again, so you may hear some occasional bashes or tools being used, but there's nothing I can do about that, so we'll be moving hastily on, and this is the battle which I've actually bumped up in the order of things. It's actually the most recent one I've got because it is a brand new map that was made by Froggy, and I don't know what the name of it is because both the name of the replay that I got and the file of the map itself were different. It's either called GRASGARD or GRASGARD. I'm not sure which one it would be. I would assume GRASGARD makes a little bit more sense because it is, I assume, supposed to be a Western Kingdoms of Men settlement, and Garkash almost sounds a little bit more orcish in its tongue. But nonetheless, we will be having the Western Kingdoms and the Northern Kingdoms of Men on the defence today against a force of combined evil men of the East and elves. That's a rather interesting alliance, but in terms of the map itself, just taking a little while to have a little look at it because obviously it is new and obviously a good deal of hard work went into it. In terms of structure, I'd say it's quite similar to Austin Eri, it's almost like the desert wedding cake style settlement that we've seen recently as well, where it's got layers and it's got a few pathways up onto each layer. The differences are, I should say, this one seems to be bigger in scope, which carries some positives and negatives for both sides. Like I'd say for the attackers, the positives are that there are more ways into the settlement, so no longer will they be funneled into one direction where they can be hammered by archers and defensive artillery. There's also more space, so once they do break through one defensive line, it will be more difficult for the defenders to recover from that, so that's what they have in their favour. However, the attackers will also have to deal with the fact there's significantly more cover on this map, so they won't be able to use their own archers or artillery to supremely good effect either, so it is going to come down to positioning more than anything else, and as long as the defenders keep their lines secure, they should feel quite nice about that sort of thing. But also just the fact that with more space to cover, and also it feels like there's just more elevation, more of a defensible position here that the defenders can use. But yeah, I'd say the cover is one of the main aspects here which the defenders are going to have at their disposal. But we'll go through the attackers first of all, I think, as we usually do, starting off with a faction which some people have been sort of a bit miffed that they haven't been seen more often lately, and that is going to be the Realm of Linden, played by Safi, and obviously the more lightly armoured of the two high elven factions. They still have a lot to offer, to be fair, but the reason why I don't think many people have played them as of yet in 0.97, or at least don't play them as much, is purely because they haven't changed a lot. They were a very well balanced faction at the first time of asking, really, which is a testament to the development team and how good they've gotten at doing this sort of thing. They've got some 4 Linden archers here mixed in with some 4 Linden marines, so 4 Linden archers obviously just the basic archers of Linden, but the marines do offer a little bit more. Obviously javelins are a big aspect of Linden's warfare, but also those spears they pull out in melee means that they can defend themselves against cavalry a little bit better, which is always very nice. But on an open field like this, well, I say it's not really going to be too much of a problem for them, cavalry, I don't think. We'll have a look at the defensive compositions in a moment, but for the most part, Linden's main problem here, I think, is just going to be this is the kind of map that Linden will really not enjoy. Just the fact that they have to go uphill into, presumably, a hailstorm of enemy archer fire is going to be difficult for them, because obviously that is their main weakness. But we'll see. I mean, they do have other factions to support them in this regard, and if they do get into melee, Linden, as we know, are very, very good, because their melee defense values are ridiculous, quite frankly. They're very, very good at keeping themselves alive in melee. Mithlon Swordmasters are a very good example of that, as the heavy elven swordsmen that they are. Obviously not heavy in terms of armour, but it's just something that I've sort of coined as I've gone along. But yeah, obviously very high base damage on heavy elven swordsmen like this. Mixture of Harlinden infantry and 4 Linden pikemen on the front line, a very standard Linden front line this, because it's so effective. There's some Mithlon pikemen in the middle as well, a little bit more expensive and a little bit better, but the sentiment is the same. The Harlinden infantry are so efficient in melee against most other line infantry units, and backed up by the very nice elven pikemen as well. It's a very effective front line, but obviously again, attrition is going to be Linden's worst enemy here. I think they're going to have to rely on their allies to help them out a little bit there, so they can deliver themselves to melee without taking too much damage. 4 Linden archers, more 4 Linden marines back here. Noldorin Guard, big fan of the Noldorin Guard because they inspire, they're very strong in melee as well. One of the best units of line infantry in the game, in terms of pure quality, I think. Discounting all the General's Bodyguards, of course. We have some Noldorin Blade Masters over here as well, which obviously are fantastic General's Bodyguard units. Still probably the best heavy swordsmen in the game, to be honest with you, because they still have that elven defense. And then finally, Horse Lords of Ulmo. So the Knights are on station here, so that's another very nice tool they could potentially use. There's a lot of room on this map, and they could go potentially right around the back if they wanted to, I think, and try and find some sneaky way up. But it is a fairly small Linden army. With all of these elites, 2 Noldorin Guard, Noldorin Blade Masters, and the Horse Lords of Ulmo, that's a big committal. So we'll see if having a slightly smaller army does impact Linden at all in this particular battle. Then we have BMK Overlord of the Dark Cloud playing as Rune. So Rune, a nice balanced faction, certainly more numbers than Linden. Probably the most numbers focused faction on the attack today, actually, interestingly enough, so potentially quite a lot of pressure on them. Some Ganthrim, the AP will be very useful in this fight against all of the defending factions, so obviously the Flagrim will also be a good choice. Obviously they will still have a fight on their hands, the AP will just help them and be useful. Rune will need to be careful, obviously, though. Not used to fighting in the snow, these men of the East, I'm sure. Then we have these Dragon's Wrath crossbows back here again. Hugely devastating if they can get into position, but on this map getting into a good position for them I think will be quite tricky, so we'll see how Rune are able to do that. Some Eastron Clansmen fully upgraded, so again going slightly more quality focused even on their lowest tier of units, but they're still going to be used, I'm sure, as the meat shield. The General's Bodyguard is the Carmel's Chosen, maybe not quite as much of a showstopper as the Noldorin Blade Masters we saw for Linden, but they're still a very nice unit to have at the centre of your army. We have some Eastron Crossbowmen, obviously again, very nice stopping power if they can get into place. They've also got the armour upgrades. Balchoth Tribesmen, nice javelins, which again can be very useful. Eastron Hunters, the mighty Dragon's Breath Cannon back here, which I'm not, again, this is the sort of thing where if they can't get it into position, it's going to be difficult to use. And then we've got some Scion Rim on the side. So again, I think Rune's success will be defined on how well they can get their units into position, but I'm a little bit worried actually they don't have the infantry power to sustain an assault for that long, so it might be a bit flash in the pan here for Rune. They need to be careful. Then we have the map creator, Froggy, who is laying siege to his own settlement at the head of an Umbarim army. Corsair infantry are a good choice, I think, because they are primarily light infantry, but they do have a few volleys in their bows first to soften the enemy up. Very nice as a first wave. Then we have some Balagar archers, obviously much more focused about being archers, much more ammunition. Nice bucklers, not actually the biggest armour values without the upgrade, but the buckler certainly helps them out there. The shield value is very, very useful for an archer of their cost. The Balaketh marksmen are sort of the heaviest of the Umbar archers that they can have on the front line en masse. The Naru and Iron Royal Guard, of course, are better, but the Balaketh marksmen can be massed up a little bit more so. Again, they don't have the armour upgrade, but they do have that shield value, so again, a very similar sort of relationship here, only the Balaketh marksman just the next step up. Some Belagar footmen back here, just the basic spears that Umbar can field. We have some shield bearers, again lacking their armour upgrade, but again the AP is going to be useful, as I said, against all of the defensive factions. Lots of Alcarondas Legion, which I'm pleased to see. They will make a very good wave of assault into the settlement, and then again another very expensive unit of knights, the Alcarondas Faithful melee knights, very, very powerful against other cavalry. Umbar do seem to have a bigger army, lots of Belagar footmen over here, so I think that's good. I think, I was worried here the attackers were going to fall into a trap of bringing just all quality-centric armies, and that would not have won them this battle, I don't think, based on the kind of map that it is. And then finally we have Inarius, who's going to be playing as Mirkwood, so the Elves of the Wood are also going to be marching alongside Evil today, interestingly enough. I always knew the Elves were up to no good. We've got the Spears of Emondwyr over here, so some basic Mirkwood forces. The mighty Elven King's Palace Guard back here as well, obviously an exceptionally powerful infantry unit. We've also got some Hiriauth, obviously the slightly more solid central unit that Mirkwood can use of line infantry. They do not have the armour upgrade here, but even so, the main thing with Elven line infantry like this is just the fact that they're so difficult to kill in melee. And the Hiriauth also have good shields, so they still don't want to be focused down by too many archers, but they are certainly more sturdy than most of the Mirkwood forces when it comes to taking arrow fire. The mighty Ents as well, they'll make very good sort of juggernauts as they crash into the enemy front lines. Obviously a lot of Mirkwood's forces are going to be hidden in this slightly wooded area of the map. Hiri Peng, so I'd imagine there's some Woodland Realm patrol around here somewhere as well. We have the Elder Council, we have some Hiriak, and then finally Thranduil is going to be marching with the Elders of the Elven King as well. So lots of elites on display here for the attackers. We'll see if that tactic pays off for them. Now, we shall move on to the defenders, and first of all, the player who sent me the battle replay, we're going to have Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud playing as Dale, the Men of the North, so they're going to be quite happy in the colder conditions, I'd imagine. Some Sword Masters of Escaroth, obviously nice, heavy swordsmen. They'll be a little bit better at standing up to the elves than a lot of other units, but obviously the main attraction with Dale is going to be their archers, units like the Athala Rangers hidden up here on the hill, ready to do some real damage to the advancing force of elves. Obviously Linden are probably not too pleased that they're the ones having to go into Dale's portion of the settlement, because that's not a good matchup for them in this sort of situation. But obviously in melee they should be able to lay a bit of a beat down on Dale if they can get there. Keldwyn River Patrol, obviously javelins, when they're as cheap as this, they are a very good choice because they're very easy to get cost efficiency off of, especially on a map like this where you can hide them until the time is right. Dalian Bowmen, as well as some Morroquendi bows, obviously nice poison arrows there. Black shots, Morroquendi pikes, a catapult, and some Dalian paladins, so a good mix there of lots of skirmishers, but some also elite infantry as well. And then down here we have the Dalian infantry corps made up of Barding Herd, Bardian marksmen, and the dismounted Earls of Dale. The most solid the most solid Dalian infantry corps that you can have really is the Barding Herd and the dismounted Earls of Dale together. Lots of heavy armour, phalanx, all around very, very solid. Obviously it does have its weaknesses, but it's very Dalian in its approach. Then in the middle we have Numenor, played by Sin of the Dark Cloud. Obviously they a little bit less archer focused than the other two factions they're facing alongside. They do have a good archer force, certainly, but in a very different way. The Seafarers of Nindamos here, of course, I've gone on record for saying they're my favourite Numenorian unit because they can do tons of damage quickly, and then they can form a very nice front line as well in their own right, especially when they're backed up by the very damaging Romena Abarim, though. Romena Abarim are actually defensively not quite as good as the Alcarondas Legion, I don't think, but their attack more than makes up for that, in my mind. Very, very nice indeed. We also have some Balagai footmen over here. Obviously we're going to have to keep an eye out for them if they clash with the Umbar version of them, because it's going to be difficult to see the little blue marks on their shields. Romena Bawabarim, that's the armour-piercing archer, of course, very, very nice. Balagai archers as well, and then at the back, a trebuchet, some Naru sentinels, and then a unit that I really like as well, the Royal Legion of Armenelos. The extra unit models do a lot for the quality of this particular unit. Very, very effective overall. And actually some cavalry as well, so they do have some cav. The Pharazim nobles, although they're going to have to be careful here because there's some very nasty enemy cavalry that's on the attack here. And then over here by the chapel we have Arthedain. It's a very nice faction as well. We have Blindness, who's going to be playing as them, some Numenas Gate Guards, obviously Arthedain. A lot of good archers for them as well, so it's not going to be any easier for Mirkwood over on this side. Dismounted Knights of Numenas, dismounted Fornos to Rain Knights, some Wardens of the North, very, very nice unit of course. Down here we do have another unit of knights, the Knights of Numenas. Again, I'm not sure whether they're going to want to just charge right down the hill into the attackers. They're probably going to be saved for later, I'd imagine. Some Evendim Spears, Arthedain Pikemen, classic combination. Dunedain Peacekeepers, I'm a big fan of the Peacekeepers. They're going to be using their axes today, civilians. And then way back over here, so just go around here. No, have I missed them? Well, there is a unit over here, some Arthedain marksmen setting up those stakes to make cavalry's life a little bit more awkward. And then way back over here we have some more Evendim Spears. So that rounds off the rather lengthy, for today's standards anyway, army composition phase, and obviously having a look at the map. But I will be making a little cut here because obviously all the attacking armies have started right down at the bottom of the hill, and there'll be a lot of manoeuvring from the defenders, I'm sure, to set up a defence as well. So I'll rejoin when the skirmish phase inevitably begins. So this is looking like a very bold move here as the defensive cavalry immediately starts to charge down the hill, the Knights of Numenas at the front, the Pharazim nobles following them in as well. But the Knights of Numenas here actually getting caught up on some Scion Rim, which is the last place they want to be really. The Scion Rim are very solid spears. I think they're going to try and just sort of get in and amongst things over here. Maybe try and go after the Dragon's Breath cannon. The Pharazim nobles choosing to take a silver medal prize there and instead just charge into the flag rim. They need to be careful here though, the defenders, because there's a real danger that they could end up losing this cavalry for not a lot. The one thing though is that it's very difficult to stop a unit like the Knights of Numenas from getting in here, and they have managed to get to the Dragon's Breath cannon, but the problem they've got here is that not enough of them have got through, and they're surely going to end up dead here. The unit is stretched, they're in and amongst everything, but the Pharazim nobles are actually going to be able to get in here and charge into that Dragon's Breath cannon. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to finish it off though. I just don't think they're going to be able to kill it quickly enough, especially not with Rune around here. Like you'd imagine with all these archers and with the E-strong crossbows, the Pharazim nobles, it's only a matter of time before they end up falling by the wayside. They're also having to deal with armour-piercing infantry nipping away at their heels. So yeah, overall, if they fail to kill off the Dragon's Breath cannon here, this was a bit of a fool's errand that they went on. And there is a very real case for saying that maybe they should have just eased off on the assault with their cavalry for a little while longer. That wasn't a particularly effective charge either, but it's quite difficult to get your cavalry up to speed when they're in such a messy situation. They're going to try and just sort of mulch their way in here to the Balchot tribesmen, try and get at least some sort of damage done. There's a bit of lag there, but the Pharazim nobles, they should be able to get away here, but the problem is they're going to be taking bolts and javelins to the back. All the while they're doing that, the Knights of Numenas have already routed, of course. Pharazim nobles, again, it's not the best charge. I feel as though they're just trying to get charges off here, but because of the hill that they're on, because of the stretched nature of the cavalry units here, it's certainly not the easiest thing. I'm actually surprised the Alcarondas faithful and the Horse Lords of Ulmo weren't mobilised sooner. They're just over here chilling out. because they would be, again, something that would be very, very useful to have in this situation. The Pharazim Nobles are taking an awful lot of punishment, but it's primarily from just basic archers, so in a way, they are absorbing a lot of archer ammunition which could be used later on more effective targets. But even so, that's not really the sort of thing you want to be using a unit like the Pharazim Nobles for, if you can help it. Dragon's Breath Cannon moving off, so you can see that Rune setting up a position over here. I think actually it looks as though Dale have counter-attacked down the hill somewhat into this initial runic advance. The Eastron clansmen over here taking point, but they are going up against Swordmasters of Esgaroth. You'd imagine in this situation the Swordmasters would be just fine, although I do think this is actually 2 units of Eastron clansmen rather than just the one. Yes, it is. So with 2 units over a longer period of time, they should be able to wear them down, but it's still going to be very, very costly here for the runic infantry. And like I said, the attackers haven't got the most numbers-focused armies here, so maybe losing too many numbers early on like this won't be what they want to do, but still, the Eastron clansmen will put up a better fight than most of this kind of unit. Well, there goes the Arthedain general. Lots of arrows buried in the snow around his body. Dalian bowmen here at the top of the hill, and they're doing a very good job at just wiping away the 4 Linden archers. And again, this shouldn't be too surprising, because the Dalian bowmen would have been in range of the 4 Linden archers sooner. You can see how far away they were when they started shooting, and actually it's even worse than that because the Moraquendi bows would have been shooting them as well. And the Linden archers, with their low armour, this is exactly the sort of situation they don't want to be in. And again, it's not a good situation for Linden to be in, and that's probably why Linden's main army is holding back until later. And I'd agree with that. I think that's probably the right thing to do. The Horse Lords of Ulmo can be used a little bit more freely, but as soon as Rune has absorbed quite a lot of damage from Dale, Linden can then come forward all at once, I think, and be a very effective hammer blow. Barding Herd coming in to shore up the Swordmasters of Esgaroth in their fight against this very large force of Eastron clansmen, but Rune aren't going to make any headway here unless they commit units of more quality, I don't think. Interestingly enough, I mean, Rune have almost got a straight shot into the settlement here, but based on the layout of it, they will have to go through these streets first. So maybe the defenders, not wanting to defend that choke point over there, willing to let the attackers into the settlement a little bit more. What have we got going on over here? Arthedain do have another unit of cavalry there. Grey Company was hidden, so mounted rangers. They want to be a little bit careful though, because there's Balagai units, and Umbar should be pretty good at keeping mounted rangers like this at arm's length. I think some Corsair infantry as well, Scion Rim. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, the mounted rangers are something else I would probably wait a little bit longer before I utilised. The Dragon's Breath still very much in effect. Not enough of the crew was killed off earlier on. Over here, meanwhile, Dale continuing to fight resolutely on the front line, and now with this armour-piercing phalanx that the Barding Herd offer to the front line, there's absolutely no way that these Eastron clansmen are going to make any sort of headway. Very nasty front line. The Swordmasters of Esgaroth are certainly lacking in the armour department next to most of the other upper-end Dalian infantry. You can just about see that they do have some lamella plating on their back. But overall, armour is not really their focus, it's melee defence, offering Dale something a little bit different, as well as a lot of high base damage, of course, that Swordmasters offer. Here you can see the Alcarondas Faithful are piling in, but all they're doing really is piling into the back of the Eastron clansmen. This isn't going to achieve anything. I'm not sure if Froggy noticed that there were actually Barding Herd there, because he wants to get the hell out of there now. You don't want to be charging right into the front of an armour-piercing phalanx, and now they can't get away. His general is right there as well, like, glitching the hell out. He's actually gone right in behind the Barding Herd. That's not good for him. I'm not sure what he hoped to accomplish there. Maybe he wanted to go around, which would have actually been a pretty good idea, but ultimately the execution was highly flawed there. What happened to the general? Not dead, is he? Maybe that wasn't the general after all. Wild. Eastron clansmen, yeah, they're wavering now. There's no chance. Here come the Horse Lords of Ulmo, though. They did manage to sneak in behind enemy lines. Not the best charge, though, and they do want to cycle out of there pretty quickly, because, again, the Barding Herd. Halberds, very, very big bonus against cavalry. Of course, you can see there's another unit of Barding Herd coming down here now. And the Horse Lords of Ulmo, this is where they're, again, the biggest weakness of the Horse Lords of Ulmo is they're fantastic as knights, really good in melee against other cavalry, massive charge. But they do not have shields, and they still suffer from the lower armour of Linden. So over a period of time, archer fire will take a pretty grisly toll on them. But here you can see this runic assault has ended in rather miserable failure Dale throwing off that assault there very, very effectively. The Eastron Hunters trying to do some damage, which, to be fair, against the Swordmasters of Askaroth, they will do. So Dale, at this point, are probably going to retreat. You know, the Horse Swords of Ulmo need to get out of there because they're getting hounded by the Barding Herd, really. More and more of these Horse Swords going down. They can't really get away too easily at this point either. They're shaken. That's how you know your knights are in a bad situation. If they're ever looking like routing, that's a very, very bad sign. Meanwhile, over on the other side here, we can see Arthedain. It looks as though there's been a bit of skirmishing going on. That's not a good sign. That's a lot of dead Grey Company is what that is. You can see there is Arthedain's Trebuchet in position. There's also another Arthedain Phalanx over here. Civilians charging in. And again, I'm not really sure what Blindness was expecting by sending in his Grey Company front and centre in broad daylight into all of the enemy archers, but I mean, that doesn't look like the entirety of the unit at least. And now they just disappeared, so I assume the unit, wherever it retreated to, went into hiding. These civilians, meanwhile, are just getting slowly poked down by the Belagaya footman. So the sacrificial lambs doing their job, but not really for any kind of purpose. They're just in here dying for no good reason. You can see here that Mirkwood are getting into position as well as Umbar, two factions with very, very good skirmish lines in very different ways, but they're getting into position here, and this is not good for Arthedain. Arthedain being forced back a little bit, I think, here. Again, it's early days, and they haven't lost anything too important. Well, I say they haven't lost anything too important. They lost their General's Bodyguard unit in their Knights of Anubis, which is not brilliant early on, but there's still time for Arthedain to recover. They haven't been struck a decisive blow, is what I'm trying to say. And the Belagaya footmen are coming forward, but again, it feels like Blindness is really just filtering in these units, and they're not really going to make any sort of progress. Like, these Belagaya footmen, I mean, in terms of numbers, they probably will end up losing this fight, but they will give as good as they've gotten, and that means that, honestly, it's only a single unit, and it's not the end of the world, but they've been used very efficiently so far by Umbar, and that's not what you want to be giving the attackers in this sort of situation. You don't want to be giving a unit of basic spears, like 100 plus kills when you're on the defense in the siege. Because it's never going to end well if that's the sort of thing that you're doing. Here you can see the Pharazim nobles continuing to try and get in here to try and deal with the Dragon's Breath cannon, but I don't know. It's not going to be. I mean, if they can pull it off, then it's on BMK really, because if he hasn't learnt his lesson yet, trying to defend his cannon, then he never will. Meanwhile, over here you can see Dale still doing the business. There is actually another pathway over here, though, which could potentially be taken by Rune to get in behind the Dalians. Dalian Bowmen and now the Blackshot Dragon Slayers also in position. You can see the carpet of runic dead bodies over there. Four Linden Archers trying to get in here, trading blows with the Morroquendi Bows and Dalian Bowmen, but again, this is the sort of situation that Linden won't be too good in if they start getting shot themselves, but for the time being it looks as though Dale have got other things on their mind, namely speaking, the melee engagement. And you can see here that there is a small clutch of Barding Herd and Swordmasters still on the front line, but now they're going up against Forlinden Pikemen and Harlinden Infantry. I think Dale are trying to shoot them down, but or are they? I think Dale are actually going after targets in the background. There's Belagaya archers over there, so yeah, Linden making some good progress now in melee. Maybe starting to give the defenders something more to think about. But you would still suggest, you can see here, yeah, the Bardian Marksmen are coming forward. The longer this is like a skirmish fight in the way that this is, the more it's going to suit Dale. Umbar are sending over some forces of their own now, who would be a much more even fight for Dale, but Linden and Rune so far have taken a lot of losses. Rune more so. But nothing decisive at this point in the battle. Some Evendim spearmen forming up a shield wall, but there's also some Arthedain marksmen who are fleeing from the spears of Emenduir. Again, it's looking a little bit sparse here for Arthedain. Like, their defence is spread out across 3 layers, and if I were the attackers, I'd be taking note of this. I'd be picking a part of the map to attack in full and going for it. Like here, there's only 2 Evendim spearmen and some Pharazim nobles over here. Like, if I were Rune, I'd be all over this right now. I'd be charging in a whole bunch of men around here, and also from down here. I think Umbar and or Mirkwood should also be attacking from the front. Like, this is a prime target, I think, for being attacked. As it is, down here, the Arthedain Trebuchet is trying to do some damage, and they did get some hits, but it's only on Corsair infantry, so I don't think Umbar will be too concerned about that. Over here, wet noodle fight between 2 spears, and the Evendim spears are slowly but surely trying to do some damage. You can see here the Woodland Round Patrol maybe trying to get into a position where they can shoot some more effective targets. Here we can see Mirkwood starting to make a play around the back. I mean, this is the problem I think Arthedain's defensive position has. It's too spread out, and there are too many gaps, well, too many ways through this map. And he hasn't managed to cover all of his angles here, and you can see that now some of these forces are going to be surrounded. These Ents, honestly, should just plough right on into these pikemen, because Ents, much like trolls, will absolutely dominate pikemen. But I think they're going to try and go after the trebuchet instead. Here you can see the Heiri Alta coming in, Heiriek. And when they're out of position, these Arthedain pikemen will not stand a chance against the much more professional Mirkwood infantry. You can see here the Dunedain Peacekeepers are trying to come in. I heard the Dragon's Breath cannon in the distance there. Dunedain Peacekeepers will be able to shore up this line a little bit more so, but it's not going to be enough in the long run. Like, these Arthedain forces already really are isolated. What happened there? Right, well, this building is burning down, so I'd assume that that's where the cannon actually hit. Trying to shoot right through the gap here. I mean, they're in a very nice position, honestly, because they can see the entirety of the centre of the Númenórean army. But it looks as though they actually killed some of their own men with that, which is unfortunate. Here you can see Rune are now coming forward in force. Harland infantry taking some damage there, Morroquendi bows, so over time the attrition is taking its toll on Linden, but Rune are coming forward, so now if Linden wanted to come forward and support this more substantial runic assault, that might be the best way to go, because Dale's army, as you might expect, was fairly heavy on its archers, so with a lot of pressure in melee, they may end up starting to fold. Trying to go after, and they actually did manage to hit it as well. Obviously, this is one of the downsides to the Dragon's Breath cannon. Their models are so big that it's actually very easy to snipe them out. Even with a trebuchet back there getting a nice hit, and now the cannon is being wheeled off behind this building to be used later. You can see here the Seafarers of Nindamos already doing a lot of damage to the Eastron crossbows there. That is the Dalian catapult, so a lot of defensive artillery, of course, trying to do some damage to Rune as they move forward. Rune don't have a substantial enough infantry force to carry this assault through. They're going to need reinforcements. Unfortunately, Linden is going to provide said reinforcements. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the map, you can see Arthedain are getting their trebuchet out of there. The Ents are still over here, feasting on some scraps, getting down here and just destroying this unit of Arthedain pikemen. And then over here, you can see Corsair infantry getting in behind. Dunedain Peacekeepers routing. So yeah, it was really kind of a foolhardy defence to try and mount for Arthedain down here. I think they've spread themselves a little bit too thin. They can recover from this, but they need to do it quickly. Otherwise, this momentum could carry Mirkwood and Umbar right to the top layer of the settlement already. Balaketh Marksman doing some damage. You can see here some Elven Spears maybe bit off a little bit more than they can chew against these Evendim Spears, but you can see here these defensive lines as well, like they're not particularly well constructed, if I'm being honest. Like, they're not on the choke point, they're a little bit further back. It's easy enough to go around them. And Arthedain need to improve this quickly, because you can see now Mirkwood and Umbar clearly smell blood, and they are coming forward in numbers. Over on this side, meanwhile, it has been much more costly for Linden and Rune. Dale have had a much more solid defence mounted, and it has been an atrocious affair for both of the attacking armies here. The Flagrim and the Harland infantry attacking as one, but they're going into a very solid front line here of Dalian Earls and Barding Herd. A good mix of a phalanx and a very solid unit of line infantry. The Earls of Dale, I don't think, get enough credit for what they can actually do, because they're a very similar unit in many ways to something like the Alcarondas Legion. Very high quality unit of line infantry. Keldwyn River Patrol also coming forward, the Dalian Paladins marching forwards as well. So Dale, not giving up this this choke point without a fight, and why not? They're doing a lot of damage over here, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's still a lot of arrows flying back and forth, but all of them are kind of inaccurate. They're kind of going over the heads, sort of being launched up into the air and going down from on high. That's a good sign of knowing that the archers aren't doing as much damage as maybe they could, which at this point probably favours Dale, honestly. Like, earlier on they were doing a lot of damage there, but not so much now. You can see over here that the Eastron Hunters and Flagrim piling in, overwhelming the Morroquendi bows and Dalian bowmen that are over here. The Athala Rangers are getting into position. I mean, this is risky from Dale, because if they can't get some good volleys off here, they're going to get caught in melee and maybe even shot up by the Umbar and Linden archers that are further down the hill. Yeah, and that's not a particularly good angle of fire either. Gamprim are over there. I heard the Dragon's Breath fire once again. There's the Dalian catapult doing its thing. portions of the settlement are burning. Rune still being somewhat cautious over here, but that's a little bit more understandable because they're mainly focusing on Dale, so they can't really push forward. But I mean, I thought if they commit just a couple of units to attacking Arthedain as well, like Arthedain is on the run here, like whole swathes of their army are just being sent fleeing by a very robust assault from Umbar and Mirkwood. The Ents doing their thing. Very difficult to stop the Ents, in all fairness. They are starting to drop now, but not a particularly well thought out defence for dealing with Ents. You can see there that the Grey Company will be able to recoup some of these losses that Arthedain has taken so far by shooting into the attackers as they move forwards with those body-piercing projectiles, but Spears of Emondwyr will force them into retreat as well. Arthedain still have units, but it must be said that Arthedain's army is in shambles right now. And it's going to be up to Numenor sooner rather than later to sort of turn their attention, I think, on Mirkwood and Umbar's advance. So far, Numenor have really just been staring down the central portion of the Runic army, while Dale do most of the heavy lifting. But this is good for Numenor, because Numenor should have a lot of manpower going into the late game. But Dale, I have to say, have done very well so far. Really, no headway has been made by Linden or Rune over on this side of things. This damage will mount up for Dale eventually, of course, and they won't be able to keep this up forever. But they're doing a lot of damage here, and if they can pull their weight in terms of kills, that's always a good sign. Here you can see the Dalians being chased by these Linden forces through this little marketplace. The Athala Rangers on the retreat. Kelduin River Patrol also running away, but the Blackshot Dragon says it is only a unit of 4 Linden archers after all, and if they get caught in melee, they are going to be dealt with very quickly by the Blackshots. But still, it has at least chased the Rangers off, and that should give Rune and Linden a little more respite when it comes to trying to push further into the settlement, which they should manage. And you can see here that Dale, I think, seeing which way the wind is blowing, is going to retreat their forces, which is a good move, I think. They realise that they've accomplished all they can here on this front line as it stands, and now they're going to move backwards to a more defensible position near to their Numenorian allies. Meanwhile, some Seafarers of Nindamos coming forward once again, but again being shown where to go really by a combination of this very solid unit of Scion Rim and some nasty volleys from the Eastron Crossbowmen, so nothing really doing for Numenor there. Pharism Nobles still buzzing around with intent. Umbar now looking like they could start to march right up the pipe into the top portion of the settlement. Meanwhile over here, Woodland Round Patrol, Balaketh Marksmen pulling out their blades in melee. And it's only a unit of Abendim Spearmen that are standing in the way, a unit that I think returned from routing as well, so it won't take much to rout them for good this time. Woodland Round Patrol firing away into the units behind them, and yeah, the Grey Company, like, this is the problem that you have when like you're trying to skirmish with your horse archers. Like, if it's only one unit, it's very easy for the enemy to just sort of skirmish them down. They're only also killing off Balaketh Marksmen, to be fair. Well, I guess the Hiri out of there now as well, but these Elven archers are just going to be able to shoot into them, and that'll be a very nice catch for Mirkwood to make as well. And it's yet more bad news, it must be said, for Arthedain if they're losing their Grey Company like this. And you can see here the Spears of Emondwyr once again chasing them off. Very small unit indeed. And again, Arthedain are just charging one unit in. It's not how things should be done, I don't think, and I think it has been proven. Like, if the defenders go on to lose this, I think it's because Arthedain have thrown so many of their units away. Like, too many of their units have just been thrown under the bus. Like, these dismounted Fornos to Rain Knights could win this fight. They're a very good unit, and these units are all depleted. And Mirkwood and Umbar here could surrender some of their gains by not sending in enough reinforcements. You can see a lot of Mirkwood's army is actually too far away. But yeah, I mean, I suppose this is a good thing here for blindness. Based on the fact that Mirkwood and Umbar just don't have their reinforcements close enough, this unit of heavy human swordsmen should be enough to kill off these units which are attacking. So fair play to Arthedain in that regard. But even so, like, it's risky to just send forward one unit at a time. Meanwhile, over here, Umbar now attacking this Evendim Spearmen front line. There is enough of these Evendim Spears at this point, though, that they should be able to actually hold. But Rune really should be busting a gut to help out the Umbar forces over here, because it's only Evendim Spears. Like, if you put them under enough pressure, they'll rout pretty quickly. They're nothing too special in melee, so they're not going to do an awful lot of damage. It'll be from the archers in behind that you take the damage. But crush this front line and you can keep the momentum going. As it is, Rune has been a bit stop-start. Rune have been like most eager to engage with Dale, interestingly enough, which is probably the strongest point of the defence so far. You can see that Dale have pulled back. You know, Rune and Linden not really too eager to move forward as it stands, which I'm certainly not surprised about. Eastron Hunters there, Balagar Archers trying to do some damage here, but the amount of damage they'll be able to do is going to be very limited. The Dragon's Breath is going to be moved over to here. Eastron Crossbowmen pushing forwards. The Numenorian Balagar Archers are going to pull back, as the Scion Room are going to prove far too much for them in melee. The Gamprim are now finally going to move forwards and try and do some damage to the Evendim Spears, who are taking some enfilading fire right up the line. But I mean, honestly, Umbar have taken a few more losses here than they would have liked. But once again, you have to say that this is about 300 Evendim Spears, which are just going to die without really making the enemy work for it. Like, they're just sort of out here on their own for no real purpose. Like, pulling them back to here would have been better, because then they're closer to supporting units. As it is, like, ugh. Not really a fan of that. Because initially it looked like they were, initially they were doing well against the Umbar forces, but that wasn't because of the positioning from the Arthedain player, it was because Rune just was being slow. If you're relying on your opponent being slow, then your defence hasn't been very well constructed, to be honest. Over here, dismounted Fornost Array Knights doing their thing. Arthedain gaining some positioning back, but again, over here, I don't think the Elves and Umbar are really too concerned about this area anymore, because most of their forces, it looks like they're going to be going over here instead. Certainly Umbar focusing more heavily over on this side. The Evendim Spearmen, victory seems certain. You know, the Arthedain Marksmen coming in, shoring up the line, but there's Alcarondas Legion over here, so I mean, what happened to the Runic Archer support? They're just deciding not to shoot anymore? They still have their bows out. No, they don't. No, they've got their hand axes out. Never mind. A lot of Adunaim Shield Guard and Balaketh Shield Bearers coming forward is now really eager to get through those Evendim Spears, who are holding up well, to be fair, but again, it's less because of the Arthedain position and more because like they haven't committed enough resources to smash that line to splinters yet. Thala Rangers pulling back, Dalian Paladins are over there in the background, but here, Rune renewing their assault on Dale. Natural enemies, Eastron Hunters and Flagrim charging into the dismounted Earls of Dale, who continue to hold the line. The Dalian Catapult, I would believe, is going to go after the Dragon's Breath here. What are they actually going to shoot at? I mean, in a linear shot, it looks like they're going to hit that building right ahead of them, so that wouldn't be what Rune wants at all. Some Horse Lords of Almost still loitering with intent. There's still some Elves further down the hill as well. Still some Runic forces outside the city as well. Very stretched armies from everyone, really. Dale and Numenor have kept their armies mostly together, which is a good sign for them. The Earls doing their thing there. The Trebuchet from Numenor firing once again. Some nice hits there on that unit of Flagrim. More manpower being depleted for Rune there. Here, the Gamprim moving forwards, and now finally the Evendim Spearmen line is cracked. Alcarondas Legion right in behind the lines as well. More burning buildings. You can see here the Anuminous Gate Guards, another unit which I think Arthedain was thinking of sending forward and then thought better of it as they started to take archer fire on the approach. The Dunedain Rangers are now firing away, which that is a nice blob for the Dunedain Rangers to shoot into. The Arthedain variant of the Dunedain Rangers, of course, with the Arthedain Heraldry on their tabards. More trebuchet shots going right down that street there. Nothing too significant there, though. Meanwhile, the Ents coming forward. I mean, I'm actually surprised here that the Ents weren't committed sooner. But with the Elven King's Palace Guard, the dismounted Fornost Array Knights were destroyed very, very quickly. There's only a unit of pikes. Again, just a single unit of pikes is not going to be enough here. Like, you've got to form bigger blocks with your defence, like fewer defensive points, but with more men on each one, rather than this sort of one-by-one approach. Because so far, Mirkwood is just sort of knocking him down like Skittles. And the Ents could honestly just continue to be here. Like, Inarius doesn't need to run away from these pikes. Like, pikes are no good against Ents at all. Unless he's just trying to make sure those Arthedain marksmen don't come back, but he doesn't need to worry about that with a unit so small. Surely he's not going to send... Oh no, they're just routing us. Surely he wasn't going to send over just a single unit of Evendim Spearmen to try and kill the Ents. Here though, pushing forward, the Alcarondas Legion, backed up by some Runic allies. coming over here and engaging the Numinous Gate Guards. The Numinous Gate Guards are not in position here. They could end up taking quite a lot of losses. I mean, they're going to be reliant here on the Trebuchet to give them a bit of support, which, to be fair, when the enemy starts to blob up, that's going to be good for them. A lot of burning buildings now in the settlement as the artillery fire continues to be traded between both sides. Some Noldorin Guards, so Linden coming forward with some of their more elite units now. These dismounted Earls of Dale have pushed back Rune all the way over to here. Some Keldwin River Patrol are also over here, maybe thinking that if they could push Rune back far enough, they could go after the Dragon's Breath, but they're not going to be able to do that. Oof. Right through the Keldwin River Patrol there, but the Keldwin River Patrol maybe not the best target to go after with the cannon, because they're so... they're so weak in melee. Here they're just going to charge in. The Harlan infantry routing there after the Keldwin River Patrol hit them in melee, and then they took a volley from the Bardian Marksman, so another unit is going to be fleeing from the defenders. The Thala Rangers in hiding. Bardian Marksman over there. You can see that the Dalian Paladins fighting away against something over here. Another pathway up onto this section that Linden decided to try and take, but the Forlinder Marines are getting smashed in melee now by the Dalian Paladins, as you would probably expect. Obviously the Forlinder Marines. I don't know whether they were able to use their javelins. There's a lot of dead bodies over here. So maybe a little bit of a sort of side battle that was going on. Let's see here. I mean, Dale will certainly have a slightly smaller army because their fight has been more all-out than everywhere else. Arthedain obviously is going to have one because they've been forced onto the defence so often. What's going on over here? Balakith Shield Bearers? How'd they get in? This looks like a completely cordoned off zone. Well, regardless, nearby these burning buildings, these Numinous Gate Guards are still holding the line very resolutely, and with the support of all of these archers as well, Arthedain are actually able to hold this section for now, but I would be more worried about over here, where they've got some very disparate units, which if Merc would have courage... Yeah, there goes the Arthedain Pikemen. Ah, don't you just love a crash? They never cease to deflate. But we can see here that as we rejoin the action, around the same point that we crashed, we can see the Alcarondas Legion are pushing forward, and this has actually forced the artillery crew off their position, but the problem they're going to have here, I think, is just the fact they're hideously exposed to the Seafarers of Nindamos, and also there's Romena about him that can come in and just sort of surround them from both sides as well. They're only going after the Trebuchet crew for now, but this could have been bait laid on by Sin of the Dark Cloud just so that he could peel away another unit of very effective Alcarondas Legion from the enemy positions. Which is good. You really want to be killing off those Alcarondas Legion because they could be a real concern moving forward into the later game. You can see back here, hang on a moment, I think I've made a bit of an error here. Yes, I did. Still got the graphics on low. How very amateurish of me. You can see here the Athala Rangers also doing their thing, a little bit battered and bruised now as this fight has gone on. You can see here the Horse Lords of Ulmo are starting to move forward with a bit of menace. I mean, only with 7 of them, they're still going to be pretty deadly. Obviously, a knight with their charge can do a lot of damage indeed, but obviously they should be fairly easy to deal with if they can get themselves caught in melee, or even just a volley from some javelins should be enough to finish them off. A very small fight going on here on the main thoroughfare. We have the dismounted Earls of Dale just finishing off yet another unit of Forlinder Marines, so yet more manpower being bled away from the attackers here. Elven manpower at that. As you can see, there is still the Dragon's Breath loitering with some intent. There's quite a few units over here as well. The Dalian Paladins may be chasing the enemy a little bit too far, getting a little bit greedy, but they're not going to be punished for that, I don't think. I think they are going to be able to retreat and live to fight another day. Noldorin Guard are over here. You can see that some more of Umbar's forces are getting into position as well. There's still a long way to go in this battle after all. And you can see that Umbar are moving forward, but again, that greediness, they delved too deeply with their Alcarondas Legion, and now they are utterly surrounded by angry Númenóreans. And they are going to be killed off fairly easily in the end. As will the Belagai footmen if they don't get any support, because they are having to go up against Romena about him here, which is really not the target they want to be facing. Basic spears like this will be absolutely carved to pieces by the more professional Romena. They're going to be able to do a good job there. There's a Dunaim Shield Guard coming forward, but even then, they're just spears. Like, they're a good unit of spears, don't get me wrong, but there's enough reinforcements here that I feel as though they need to make a choice to maybe be a little bit more bold in their decision making here. As you can see here, that's a rather unfortunate. It's almost like he was aiming for it as he destroys the steeple of the church. You can see over here as well that now the Illuminous Gate Guards are getting shot in the back by the Woodland Realm Patrollers. Merc would make their slow but somewhat inevitable advance forward. If Merc would have been a little bit quicker in this fight, I feel as though the defenders could really be on the back foot. The Dunedain Troll Slayers have come forward, but again, I would say that they're just a little bit too close to the enemy lines. They get a nice volley off into the front of the Balaketh Shield Bearers, and they should be able to kill them in melee as well, to be fair, but they're putting themselves in harm's way here, and the main problem will be archers and crossbows, as you can see from back here. But the Eastron crossbows are actually going after the Illuminous Gate Guards, I think, and not the Troll Slayers. I think that's a bit of a mistake. I think the Troll Slayers would be the better target here, because the Gate Guards are still so down on their manpower, they'll be easy enough to kill in melee. Meanwhile, here a little bit more like it this now from Umbar, with the support from the Adunheim Shield Guard and also Linden pushing forward with these Noldorin Guard. This will force Numenor into a bit of action here. They're going to need to shore up this line with something a little bit more. Otherwise, Umbar and Linden will be able to force their way through here, and then they'll be right in and amongst the heart of the defence here around the main keep. But Dale's catapult is here, and that is a brutal volley right into the middle there, breaking even the Noldorin Guard. Perfect. They did get some friendly fire into the bargain there as well, but that won't be enough to console the attackers there. Dalian catapult with a brutal volley there. Very, very nice. It's a bit of a weird fight, this, because it's very stop-start from the attackers. Like, they're pushing forward in big droves, and then they're like sort of stopping en masse. It's kind of weird, and I can only imagine they're being hesitant because of the artillery. As you can see here, the dismounted Earls of Dale charging through the marketplace to back up the Kelvin River Patrol and the Dalian Paladins, as there's a lot of elves in here. It's kind of cool to see this fight sort of in and amongst the market stalls. Kelvin River Patrol defeat seems certain, but with the dismounted Earls of Dale, maybe this fight will turn around. I think the difference maker, though, is going to be the Elven Pikemen, so it's going to be difficult for Dale to really get into close quarters to use those long swords, or arming swords, I suppose you'd call them. Adunheim Shield Guard still fighting on the front line, of course. The locked morale Black Numenorians standing firm in the face of that brutal Dalian artillery fire. But obviously with just these spears, that isn't going to be enough. There goes the Dalian archer, getting too deep into the Linden Elves there and paying the ultimate price. Yeah, they're going to need more on this front line yet again, but they're not going to want to commit more with that Dalian catapult in such an advantageous position. There's Morriquendi pikes back here as well. What have we got on the other side of this little keep over here? This almost looks like it could be a dungeon, sort of separate to the main keep. We've got some Dunedain Rangers being hounded by the Alcarondas faithful, so no rest for the weary from an Arthedain perspective. The Pharazim nobles are going to try and come forward to support. The Balaketh shield bearers are here, trying to get in and amongst the melee action with the Trebuchet crew and the Wards of the North, but there's only going to be so much they're going to be able to achieve. They're decent mace men, but they are utterly outmatched in melee here. The Wards of the North more than capable of looking after themselves in melee. And surely that's going to be enough to send them routing. They're not actually routing at the moment, they're just pursuing the cavalry, amusingly enough. Right, this is panning over to here is where I crashed last time, so I'm a little bit worried of going over here. Pharazim nobles, but they'd have to be suicidal to charge in here with Elven spears and Ents on hand to deal with them. Eastron crossbowmen still doing their thing, and still, like, these Dunedain Troll Slayers have been hung out to dry yet again. I want to be more positive about Arthedain here, but I'm really struggling, because every time I pan over to them it seems like they're just sort of charging more of their units into a lost cause. Like a firing squad here, the Eastron crossbowmen, and there's not enough Dunedain Troll Slayers anymore to even kill them in melee. And you know that's a bad thing when you're talking about Eastron crossbows. Wardens of Elos Tyrian marching forward, more Linden elites making their way into the outskirts of the settlement. Or the outskirts of the main portion of the settlement anyway. Balaketh shield bearers moving forward, so still Umbar not yet ready to write off this assault, and nor should they, because they're still putting up a decent fight on this front line with their Black Numenorian spears and those mace men doing a decent job. Morriquendi pikes are still those Alcarondas faithful doing the business in the backfield as well, making life awkward for Dale. But there's no assault going on elsewhere, so Dale is free to sort of use all their resources over here to just keep them at arm's length. because all of the Linden forces are boxed up inside this marketplace, and they will win this fight eventually. But it's taking them quite a long time to do it, obviously, because these heavily armoured Dalian troops are not going to go down too easily. With the dragon emblems on their backs. Obviously the Dalian paladins have also got the chunkier shoulder pauldrons and those helms with the almost Roman-like helmet ornament. Balchoth and Trisman coming over here as well. Still like that. I feel as though Rune and Linden over on this side are really running low on manpower, which is why they can't move forward. Because Dale would simply overwhelm them. So it's going to have to be in other portions of the settlement where the attackers make their headway. And I think it's going to have to be Mirkwood, because I mean Umbar are doing their bit. They're sort of engaging the enemy, but Mirkwood, they need to be faster here. Like, as much as I've ragged on about Arthedain in this fight, like, I'm not really all that impressed with how slow Mirkwood has been. Like, yes, they don't have the biggest army, but they have an army full of quality, which they should be using to better effect here. Like, Rune, Umbar and Linden are dying in dozens, while Mirkwood just sort of hang out, which I'm not really too impressed with. So again, like, Mirkwood have done well because of Arthedain's rather odd defensive positioning in the early game, but now they need to capitalise on that, and they're being too slow, in my opinion. And they could end up throwing away that advantage. I mean, in come some more runic forces to really help shore up this Umbar assault, Scion Rim and Flag Rim, so solid spears as well as armour-piercing line infantry. But again, I feel as though this is just a really slow grind, which is not really going to yield too much in the way of results for either faction, which is probably worse for the attackers. You can see here the Bardian marksmen trying to go after. There's Gamp Grim to shoot. There's Eastron crossbows to shoot. Heerdy Peng moving over. Yeah, and obviously here with Gamp Grim getting shot at point blank. That's going to be some good kills that Dale are going to be picking up yet again. Ooh. Yeah, more catapult fire from Dale, yet again trying to, Rune now pulling their own forces off the front line. Because defeat seems certain. Numenor doing their thing in melee. And still not enough movement over here. Like, I don't really know what they're waiting for, because things are only going to get more difficult for them as time goes on, because they're not making any progress anywhere else, the attackers. They need to move forward in that flank. Whether they're ready or not, like, they need to just start committing. You're never going to get the perfect opportunity to move forward in a fight like this, I don't think. Not where you've already taken too many losses. The Balchoth Tribesmen getting shot now. Dunaim Shadow Bows, obviously these rangers doing the business, and not only will they get the Tribesmen, they'll also get some Flag Rim into the bargain there as well with their body-piercing projectiles. So it's a win-win there for Numenor. Yet again, intelligent use of the skirmishers. Dismounted Elzadale moving forward. There goes the Linden General. Same fate as the Arthedain one. Arrows buried into the dirt all around them. Bardian Marksman. Now finally the Gamprim, I think, seeing which way the wind is blowing over here. If they just stay in position, they're just going to get shot up. So they're going to try and at least move forward to force the Bardian Marksman back. They're going to get more volleys as they do so. I think those are Eastron crossbows. So the Bardian Marksmen all of a sudden are now shaken, so they're going to have to retreat. But still, job done for them. A few more Gamprim killed off. Noldorin Guard charging through the gardens of these residences. Ooh, boy. 3 perfectly placed artillery shots. The attackers are having such a difficult time over here, and finally, well, there goes the Numenorian general, Pharazim nobles, but finally we have some movement over here. I think finally seeing that they're taking a beating on the other side of the battlefield. The Umbar forces that are over here, as well as the Mirkwood forces, are having to move forward. Alcarondas Legion in the vanguard, Mirkwood kind of moving forward in support, getting their archers back. Remena about him swamping forwards. Alcarondas Legion on the front line. But they're slow. They're so slow, Mirkwood. It's so unfortunate, because Umbar charging forward, taking the brunt of this damage, and then Mirkwood nowhere to be seen. Very, very poor. Pharazim nobles charging into the crossmen, so again, even though they're depleted, the cavalry's still doing their thing. Rune were able to get up in support of Umbar faster than the elves were. Here the Altha over here. Going to try and get into melee now, but the Alcarondas Legion will have already taken a real beating by the time the elves get onto the front line. Elsewhere, Those catapult volleys were absolutely brutal, of course. Barding Herd are now moving in to shore things up, though, because it is fairly continuous pressure that the defenders, I should say, are under now. But yeah, like with that phalanx, they should be enough to turn this fight around again. But Nolder and Guard are on the way forward now, and with a charge into the back of these Barding Herd, that will be very, very bad for the defenders. So you can see here Rune and Linden making their move as Dale have fallen back, but they've left massive cavernous holes in their defence, which they've had to because they just don't have the manpower to cover this whole area anymore, Bardian Marksman. Meanwhile, you can see over here still, Morroquendi Pike's actually coming over here, and Dale victorious because of those reinforcements. Valtroth Tribesmen charging off. So that may be why Dale can't actually defend all these angles, because they sent over forces to kill off that small Linden force, but maybe that could be a good thing in the end, because that means they will have units in behind the enemy attack as it moves forward. But that will only be good, of course, if they can keep holding on in the middle. And Linden and Rune finally making some good headway, but those Balagyr archers, the Adunheim shadow bows are there, as well as the Athala rangers, so body-piercing projectiles being used to good effect. Can Mirkwood make up for how slow they've been? I mean, I'm sure they can, because their army's still in good enough condition. The Seafarers of Nindamos being engaged in melee by the Hiriauth, which is not a good sign for Numenor at all. Castamir's Rangers moving forward, Greenwood Rangers back there for Mirkwood as well, so a ton of Rangers revealing themselves. The Woodland Realm Patrol moving in as well. The single unit of Balagyr footmen is not going to be enough to hold the line for much longer, so I think more and more the defenders are being hemmed back towards their keep. Arthedain's Dunedain Rangers trying to do their thing. Romena Abarim are routing off now Hiriak. There are the Ents, although there are only 3 Ents left, so they finally sort of run their course. I think Wardens of the North are in here, facing off against Alcarondas Legion with the support of the Romena Abarim, but the problem is they are right in the sight lines there of the Umbar and Mirkwood Rangers. The Elven King's Palace Guard is taking a ton of damage as they move forward by the Romena Boabarim. Obviously those armour-piercing archers will do some nice damage to General's bodyguard units. That's pretty much their entire purpose. As Rune and Linden try to swamp forward, but I mean they don't really have the manpower to make this stick. And honestly, you know, they need to be a little bit careful because if they get a bit too far ahead of themselves before Mirkwood and the rest of the army over there is ready to support them, they could end up getting overwhelmed here. There are Carmels chosen at the centre of this attack, as well as some Noldor and Guard. But these Gamprim over here getting utterly surrounded. Noldor and Guard not going to be enough to save them, I don't think. The Alcarondas Faithful are coming back now. Bardian Marksmen skirmishing with the Eastron crossbows. That's going to be a good catch for them. Dragon's Wrath crossbows. So all of a sudden there's a lot of variables going on here. There's a lot happening all at once. The Alcarondas Faithful able to worm their way into the centre of this defence, and they're going to try and finally kill off the Dalian catapult. Will they be successful? Who knows? Hiri Peng moving forward, so that's going to be more archer pressure coming in. The Dragon's Wrath crossbows can't be allowed to have free reign, so even though these Bardian marksmen will be crushed in melee, they need to stop them from firing somehow. Otherwise you can kiss goodbye to those dismounted earls. Boabarim now in melee, charging into the flag rim. Should be enough to kill them, to be honest with you, with the numbers discrepancy, but with those... the Elders of the Elven King coming in with their high mass projectiles as well. It may just be a case that the defenders don't have enough manpower. With Arthedain losing whole sections of their army for basically nothing, it was always going to be difficult to come back from that. Not sure whether they're going to be able to do that. Alcarondas Faithful coming around the side, going after Arthedain's Dunedain Rangers, even as they shoot into the Hiriak there. The Ents are still online. The Elven King's Palace Guard is in here. Wardens of Amon Lank moving forward from Mirkwood as well. Like, Mirkwood have got so many resources left available to them. Which is why I'm so surprised they waited so long to pounce, to be honest with you. They could have really had the defenders on the back foot before this, I think, as now, obviously, with the support of Umbar's line infantry as well, it's always going to be very difficult now to stop the rot. There's still a long way to go in this fight, so the defenders are not going to just roll over and take this by any means. Boabarim victory seems certain, finishing off the Scion Rim. The Adunheim Shadowbow's defeat is a distinct possibility as the Carmels chosen do their thing in melee. They're good, the Adunheim Shadowbows, but here they're up against the General's Bodyguard line infantry unit. Now there's some dismounted earls coming in, which might be enough. Although I think they're routing, yes they are, so the Carmel's chosen still going to be able to do their thing. Sword and shield in hand. Blackshot Dragon Slayers are firing away, but at what? Alcarondas Faithful going after the Bardian Marksman, successfully of course, the Bardian Marksman over here. Going to be killed in melee by the Dragon's Wrath crossbowman. And over here you can see the Hiri Peng moving forwards as well. E-strong crossbows firing into the side, pouring salt into the wounds of the Bardian marksman. Lok Flagrim continuing to charge up the hill. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers are here. More runic forces and now Mirkwood forces are arriving, so now they're really under the cosh here. They do have a lot of forces left in this little keep over here, including the Royal Legion and the Pharazim Swordmasters, as well as a lot of plates. So I think Numenor, really, what they're going to do, this is going to turn into like a choke point battle eventually, where Numenor are just going to sort of bank up within their keep and try and hold that line. Oh dear, that catapult just getting absolutely mown down by the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. E-strong crossbows firing away. Archers pouring into the Belagair archers over there. Mirkwood continuing to move up the hill. The Dunedain Rangers, surely it's only a matter of time now. Castamir's Rangers doing their thing. Hiri Peng are pursuing something about him. Noldorin Blade Masters on their way forwards as well. All of Mirkwood's forces around the back over here, of course, victorious. Took some damage, of course, from the archers on the approach, but that's to be expected when you're the attacker. Have to take some damage. I like the layout of these buildings back here on the back end of the settlement. It's a shame that, you know, in a siege like this, you're probably not going to see the back end of the settlement. Dismounted Knights of Annúminas moving out. So Arthedain committing forward their last... This is their last hurrah, basically. Trying to make life as difficult as possible for Rune and Mirkwood to get up to the hill. And then obviously it will be a final stand from Numenor, which will take this amount of time. And the Dismounted Knights of Annúminas will take quite a lot of dislodging. Obviously multiple HP, very defensive in nature, very strong armour. But with all these units, which are just going to overwhelm them, and obviously getting shot to death as well is not going to help. Dragon's Wrath crossbows burying a lot of their bolts into the dirt there. I like the sort of like the wooden barricades on these two sides. Just the one way in. It's going to be a very difficult force to dislodge, but I mean the key here is whether the attackers still have ammunition. I mean, if the Dragon's Wrath crossbows have ammunition, they can just sort of sit here, shoot through the gap and do tremendous damage very, very quickly. Blackshot Dragon Slayers taking some damage there from the Wardens of Amon Lenk. Some Woodland Realm patrol over here as well, loitering around. It's going to take a little while, I think, for the attackers to sort of trudge their way into position. Wardens of Elos Tyrian as well, they certainly still have ammunition, which is not good in this situation when the defenders are so densely packed. They're going to be able to get into position and shoot right through them. At least I'm sure that will be the plan. I mean, there's nowhere left for the defenders to run, so they'll have to counter-attack back outside, and then they'll be sort of surrounded on the wrong side of the crescent moon. And then that defeats the entire purpose of falling back to the keep. Castamir's Rangers as well. I think there's still Greenwood Rangers around here somewhere as well. So tons of Rangers, still Archers, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. Charging out, we have the Knights of Annúminas now. So yeah, like this is the thing. Like they're going to the Wardens of Elos Tyrian trying to get into position, but the Arthedain infantry charging out to meet them. Blackshots apparently still have ammunition. The Dragon's Wrath crossbows trying to get into position to shoot as well, I'm sure, but instead they are just going to be engaged as well. The Dismounted Knights of Annúminas shaken, which is surprising considering they're a unit which inspires. But I suppose the situation is pretty grim. Rangers, Dragon's Wrath crossbows, like fish in a barrel this is going to be, because I mean if the defenders come out they're going to get overwhelmed. Although there, Dragon's Wrath crossbows, ammunition, tinking harmlessly off the bricks. These strong crossbows fighting. Not sure what they're fighting, to be honest with you. Blackshot Dragon Slayers firing away. Here the Wardens of Elos Tyrian. Out come the Blackshot. So I mean, the Wardens of Elos Tyrian do need to get right up near the gap to use their ammunition, and this is probably what the rest of the fight is going to be, to be honest. The attackers trying to use their skirmishers. So, I mean, if they don't, they probably will lose this fight because there's so much quality there on the defence. In come the Woodland Realm Patrol. That could be enough to kill the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, to be honest with you. So not good for them. Dismounted Knights of Annúminas coming back out of the settlement once again, or settlement keep, I should say, once again. I wonder where this keep was from in Medieval 2. The sort of the domes and spikes almost makes me think Kiev and Rus. Dismounted Knights of Numenus trying to force the enemy away once again, but they can set up a really nasty crossfire if they wanted to here. The attackers. All depends on how they want to approach the situation. You can see here they're just trying to sort of use the walls for cover. Royal Legion of Armenelos is still here. Again, there's quality here, but the problem is I don't know if they have the manpower to deal with this, because I mean the attacks have got quality too. Nolder and Blade Masters. They've still got some Carmel's Chosen somewhere, albeit depleted. There's some Hiri Peng in the background there. I mean, not as much quality as the defenders to be sure, but numbers, skirmishers. Still those Alcarondas Faithful, of course they won't be all that useful here. Ramena Bawabrim coming outside. I think honestly it's probably best we go up to ×2 speed here, because this is going to be... This fight is... There's not much for me to really say here other than just comment on things as it happens, so ×2 speed it will be. Ramena Bawabrim routing off, and of course this is the problem the defenders have. They're backed into a corner here, and they don't have anything to really answer the attacking skirmishers as the Wardens of Alosterion with their dual blades come forward. Wardens of Alosterion, and the attackers have earned the right to do this throughout the entire fight, and I feel as though the deciding factor in this fight may very well be the Arthedain player throwing so much of his manpower away for no real purpose. Mirkwood were a bit slow, but I feel as though that isn't as much of a sin as the Arthedain player committed during this fight. I don't like to be so negative, but there it is. Dale and Numenor have done very well throughout this fight, and I'm sure that will be reflected in the kills. Dale especially will probably end up with an awful lot of kills. Alcarondas Legion, the first ones to get into this little settlement. And I think they were trying to kill off what was left of the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, but they're going to be pounced upon by the dismounted Knights of Illuminas. Yet more arrows and bolts being sent over. Just trying to get as many kills as they possibly can before this turns into an inevitable grind fest. More damage being taken again, just sort of going back over to the other side. This is more like what a siege probably would have been like. Just trying to avoid fighting one another. Greenwood Rangers here. Castamir's Rangers as well. Blackshot Dragon Slayers doing their best, but there's only so many that you can do with 3 of them. More bolts being sent through the gap there. Out come the dismounted Knights of Illuminus, and if the attackers are swift, this should be the end of them, really. Crossbow bolts, infantry charging in as we enter the final 10,000 frames. Numbers-wise, there's a very clear discrepancy, but quality, I mean, it's not impossible the defenders win this, but they need to hope that the attackers run out of ammunition sooner rather than later. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus taking 10 or so casualties there. Castamir's Rangers coming in. Like, the attackers could make a mistake here by just sending in units one by one. That will not work. Castamir's Rangers will get absolutely dumpstered by Royal Legion of Armenelos in melee. Body-piercing projectiles finding their mark though through the Pharazim Swordmasters and the Naru Naaru Sentinels. These Castamir's Rangers will be defeated eventually, however, and it could be that they're just here to get in the way of these units from moving. How many casualties are they actually inflicting though? The Naru Naaru Sentinels, of course, with those shields, nice armour as well. You know, among pikes, they are very resilient in this sort of thing. They will, of course, continue to take losses as time goes along, but those Castamir's Rangers, not really. I'm not sure what they're doing here. They're just sort of in and amongst the defence. This might be the opportunity they've been waiting for, though, the attackers, because the Royal Legion are now off the front line. They could charge in with a bunch of infantry here and make sure that the defenders can't really get set as such. I think the screenshot I'll try and get is going to be in here somewhere, near the fountain. In come the the Alcarondas Legion, I should say. I think now is the time to try and commit everything, honestly. I think this is it. The Elven King's Palace Guard are moving in, as well as the Carmel's Chosen and the Flag Rim. ruin them indeed. I mean, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows are not half bad in melee either. There may only be 25 of them, but they'll still be a presence, I'm sure. The Elven King's Palace Guard, again, 15, because they took a real beating from the skirmishers on the approach, but Noldorin Blade Masters, here we go. I mean, this is it. If the defenders go on to win this... Okay, so after the second crash that this map has now produced for me, we're going to have to watch things from on high, because clearly there are certain things that it does not like. Which is unfortunate, because I do like the map, but the crashes are starting to grate on me a little bit at this point. I only have a limited amount of time to record these things, and yeah, that sort of thing doesn't help, because I've been recording this same battle for quite a while at this point. I can't even watch that because the frame rate is dying. Yeah, that's no good. I don't know what's happening here. It's Eastron crossbows, but like the Rangers aren't even firing, which is what's surprising me. Ooh, yeah. It really doesn't like it when you're in there. Okay, so we're going to have to watch from up here, I think. Partially within one of these little domes, which is on top of the keep. We can at least see things from up here. We can kind of see the battle line as well. Very unfortunate technical issue this, because it's a shame, because again I do like the map and I do like the idea that this final stand is within this keep, but clearly something is not quite right. Nara and Iris Sentinels are still going to be fighting hard, so we're still going to be on times 2 speed, of course. In fact, we could probably get away with times 6 speed at this point, purely to get things into a situation where we're looking at the end of the game, because I need time today to be able to record stuff in bulk, so if I don't do it today, I won't be able to do it at all. This recording session has probably been an hour longer than it could otherwise have been. Here the Alth are moving in. Greenwood Rangers are just in behind there. You can see the Warns of Elos Tyrion trying to find an angle for them to shoot as well. But you can see here the Nara and Iris Sentinels together with the elites from Numenor are doing a decent job of holding the front line, but the problem's going to come. Noldorin Blade Masters are doing a good job on the front line. You can see the Dragon's Wrath crossmen are in there. It really is going to come down to whether these elites from the defenders are just going to have enough stuff in them to keep holding on, because there's still a long way to go. Well, there's still a lot of enemy attackers to like mulch their way through, and even stuff like Hiri Peng, the Elven Rangers, they won't go quietly into that good night. So it's not a case of if they win this melee fight with like 3 guys left they'll go on to win, because they're going to need to win it somewhat more convincingly than that. But the Pharazim Swordmasters still in pretty decent condition. The Noldorin Blade Masters, though, are also in very decent condition, and yeah, I think this is it. I think as they move forward, the Warns of Ammon Lank poured in, which is another unit which the defenders can scarcely afford to fight at this point. I wonder how many times they've said Illidan down there at this point. The Elders of the Elven King, of course, another unit which is very accomplished in melee, so yeah, the attackers are going to take this one home. But very close nonetheless, very close differential here. And I do feel as though it does come down to the fact that Arthedain, their defence, I didn't like it at all. It was poorly thought out. You know, it was too stretched, it left too many gaps in it. Not brilliant. And ultimately Mirkwood and Umbar were just able to so easily go through those first few layers without really losing anything important at all. The defenders were always going to be struggling after that. And there we go. And Sin of the Dark Cloud, he got the fewest kills, but his army was only really committed towards the end, when things were already looking pretty bleak. Dale got a lot of kills though with 3,000. Arthur got a lot of kills, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was so many of their men just didn't do the job they needed to. The attackers, very even, but with Rune getting the most, Froggy getting the least there with Umbar. But for the most part, that's a pretty decent spread. What did the damage for Dale? Well, we have some Morroquendi bows doing very, very well for themselves, but a pretty even spread, honestly. These Swordmasters of Esgaroth getting 449, they must have been the ones in melee early on against the Clansmen, doing very nicely for themselves. So it does go to show that Swordmasters, if you put like any old garbage up against them, low tier units get absolutely destroyed by them. Catapult doing very well, of course, as well, which, you know, the Catapult could have been enough to mount a bit of a fight back, but in the end, the damage and the routing it was able to inflict wasn't quite enough. But there we go. Big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one to me, in spite of the technical difficulties that the replay seems to have suffered. It is still a very good map, and big thank you to Froggy for making it for us. And yeah, an interesting match. You know, I feel as though the size of it meant that both sides were not really sure how to approach it, but in the end, I feel as though the attackers were good value for their win. When they did come forward, they were decisive. I think, especially, honestly, in spite of getting the fewest kills, I think Froggy deserves the title of MVP for his team, because he was the one that like went in and he basically took the damage on the chin so that his allies could do their thing. And again, kills are not really the best metric for seeing how well a player played. So yeah, I'd give the MVP to Froggy here, honestly, in spite of getting the fewest kills on the field. And yeah, big thank you to all the players involved, big thank you to sending this one in. Next one, I'm not quite so sure. Again, it kind of depends at this point, based on the limited time I have left to record, what I can actually squeeze in. But we'll see. Again, I have plenty of replays to be getting along with. It's just a matter of selecting the one that's appropriate to follow on from the last one. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.